information available coming out sort of exponentially quickly. It's amazing.
I'm on a quest to figure out my metabolism.
As you get older, sirtuins stop working.
All the research is positive.
Right now we've been through all the horrible things that can happen to you. There are ways to reverse all of this. People just do significantly better.
I'm Alice Dogruyol. This is the Metabolic Muse podcast, and today I have Dr Sandra Kaufmann with me, one of the world's leading longevity doctors, and there is much to learn from this woman. Let's talk a little bit about you and your rise to becoming the most coveted longevity doctor in the world, which let's face it, you are. There aren't many people doing what you're doing at the level you're doing it at. And I know that, you're building up so many air miles because you are flying all over the world constantly. Everyone wants a piece of you. So maybe we should start. Where did you start? Where did your medical life begin? And how did it evolve to becoming a longevity physician?
Well, it certainly didn't start that way. I actually wanted to be a tropical ecologist. And I went to undergrad at the University of Miami. I went to grad school at the University of Connecticut, and I was a tropical ecologist. And I studied leaves and cellular biology and all of those wonderful things. And it was fantastic. It was a great education. The problem, however, as my dad pointed out, there was no money in it. And I really didn't want to be completely poor. And that sounds terrible, but it's the reality, right? So I went to med school. And with a background in cellular biology, I found that it wasn't terrible. And I ended up becoming, after trying out a few different specialties, I did a year of general surgery, I did a year of brain surgery, ended up being an anesthesiologist, trained at Hopkins. Then I did a year of fellowship doing pediatric anesthesia. But what all of that taught me was how the body processes medications, how medications get processed in the body, sort of like the give and take, how we dose things, how we regulate things. So it was a fantastic training system to then try to figure out why we age from a cellular basis, taking the pharmacology information and then melding it all together to figure out why we age and then how to block it. So I didn't plan on getting to where I am, but it seems to all sort of fit together retrospectively.
So I guess you use yourself as an experiment. Do you walk the walk or just talk the talk?
That is the understatement of the day. Oh, yes. I am the strange woman who, oh my God, my kids want to kill me. I will be sitting in the kitchen with an IV sticking out of me, random syringes in front, just like putting stuff in my body. I mean, I know what it is, and I'm pretty sure it's good for me. Every now and then it's too much or too soon or whatever it is, and I have a little bit of an issue. But yes, I am a constant experimenter because if I don't know what it can do, how could I possibly then convey that information to other people?
Sure, and I'm a little bit the same in that I like to experiment on myself. There are lots of things that I am told as a type 1 diabetic that I absolutely cannot do, even if I know that there's potentially a lot of benefit. And I'm very cautious, but I do also like to experiment on myself. And, I want to try and mitigate the condition that I live with and live for as long as I possibly can and as well as I possibly can. There's no point living a long life if it's not a healthy life.
Oh, absolutely. Spot on. And so people in the longevity world, we talk about lifespan and health span. So what you're talking about is health span. You want to be as healthy as possible, as long as possible. And I make that point because when people talk about longevity and they are only worried about their lifespan, they envision being very old and very fragile and crotchety, and very just not living the life they want to lead. And that's not what this is about. This is about what you said. This is about being able to do things to the utmost, right? Be healthy as long as possible, live your life, live your dreams, just be just as active and joyful as possible.
Yes, absolutely. Tell me then about your system, your protocol. You've divided it up into 7 tenets. Explain that to me.
Sure. So this is actually where I'm always fearful that your audience is going to get a little glazed over. So I'll try to make this not as terrible as possible.
I love it when you get into the science, because whilst a lot of it does go over my head, I do learn a little bit more every time I'm exposed to it. And I think we all need to understand more about our biology, to take more control of our own health. I really don't believe we should put as much, trust in the medical system as many of us do. I think we need to doctor ourselves to a certain extent.
Absolutely. So the answer is I wouldn't take all distrust away from physicians, because there are a lot of really good physicians.
No, of course.
But at the other hand, we are the caretakers of our own bodies. So more information is always better.
Yeah, I mean, what I mean by that is, for example, I'm diagnosed as type 1 diabetic. I'm given my tech, I'm given my insulin, and told to count carbs, and really then I'm sent on my merry way. But I know there's a whole world of things out there that can offer me support, and then just not really offered or talked about.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
It's through my own curiosity that I've figured all these other things out.
No, without a doubt. Okay, so what are the 7 tenets of aging? So it starts with the idea that we age because our cells age. So everything I do is from a cellular perspective. So tenet 1 has to do with anything that goes awry in your nucleus. So this is telomeres that get shorter. This is epigenetic changes over time. And this is a shift in a heterochromatin-euchromatin distribution, which people will be like, oh shit, what is that? And the answer is it doesn't really matter. But these are things that go wrong, obviously, in the nucleus, in every cell of the body. But they're remediable. And that's the important part. We can fix these things, or at least make them better than they would normally be. So that's tenet 1. Tenet 2 has to do with your mitochondria. There are roughly 7 things, depending on how you count them, that go wrong with your mitochondria. And these are easy things. NAD deficiency is one of them, which is very important in the Krebs cycle, as well as in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, as well as glycolysis. So free radical accumulation is a big problem. Sirtuin 3 deficiency, because Sirtuin 3, 4, 5 run your basically all the mitochondrial homeostasis is run by your sirtuins. There's something called your mitochondrial permeability transition pore. It sort of opens and closes, and it sort of determines if your cell lives or dies under different stresses. There's fission and fusion of your mitochondria. There's a variety of things, right? Your mitochondria have their own DNA. That is all maternal, which is why, anyway, that's a whole nother subject. Anyway, 7 basic reasons why your mitochondria go awry. And we're going to learn more, but right now it's roughly 7. Tenet 3 has to do with pathways. And these are things that are in your DNA that become enzymes that affect things as sort of like a chain or a domino effect. So we start with the 7 mammalian sirtuins. These are histone deacetylases, and they're like on-off switches. I know everyone does that. But they control all cellular homeostasis. So as you get older, roughly early 40s, sirtuins stop working. So everything goes awry. So how your redox reactions work sort of go awry, where you store fat, your circadian rhythms, your DNA repair mechanisms, just to name just a few. All of these are sirtuin controlled. And by the time you hit 40, they just don't work anymore. And this is when you start truly, truly aging. So that's sirtuins. There's a pathway called the AMP kinase pathway, and this measures how much energy you have, as an example. And when you have a lot of energy, it gets turned off. But if you have no energy, or you're having a caloric restriction diet, or for some reason you're sort of semi-starving, it gets turned on and it puts your cells in a state of sort of hibernation. And that's very good for longevity.
So fasting.
That's why fasting and caloric restriction is good for you, right? And then the opposite of that is something called mTOR, and this sort of senses nutrients and it builds things. So it's very active when you are young. As you get older, you don't want it to be active, which is why some people like take rapamycin. I think partial inhibition of mTOR is very useful, but full inhibition is very dangerous. So it's a whole other discussion as well. And then lastly in the pathway are your circadian rhythms. And this is an absolutely pathway-driven system. And sleeping and not sleeping actually can drive up to 40% of your genome or the proteins made by that genome. So it's extraordinarily important. Not sleeping is just sort of like not good for your brain and fuzz, etc. it is sort of the canary in the coal mine of all of the other aspects of homeostasis. All right, so that's pathways. Have I lost you yet?
No.
We still good?
No, I'm just thinking if sleep is so important, how women are screwed when they have children, right?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. In fact, what's really interesting...
Because my sister has 3 kids and she actually realised she hadn't had a full night of sleep for sort of 10 years.
Oh, yeah. No, it's horrible. In fact, people that, especially women, that have night shifts over several years, higher incidence of breast cancer.
Wow.
If you are in a city that has a lot of light and you're not sleeping as well, higher incidence of cancer. Anyone that's not sleeping well, incidences of osteoporosis go up, obviously associated with fractures, cardiovascular disease, obesity. All of your metabolic pathways and your repair systems fail if you're not sleeping when you're supposed to be sleeping. So that's a huge aspect of aging.
And the other thing you said that resonated was that everything starts going awry at 40. Mm-hmm. And I can attest to that. My autoimmune condition is triggered at around then. A lot of my friends have had similar issues, health issues, and it all seems to have started around 40.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not a coincidence.
It is not a coincidence. This is when things start failing. It's when your sirtuin shut down. It's when you're NAD deficient.
And I actually had a full fertility MOT around 38, and it was looking okay. Mm-hmm. And then I went back at around 40, 41, and it had dropped off a cliff.
Sure.
I couldn't believe it.
Oh, yeah.
So
the answer is you are living the reality that we know. Absolutely, without a doubt.
It's fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
So carry on with your tenets.
Okay, so the next tenet has to do with, I call it quality control. So this is DNA repair mechanisms, protein repair mechanisms, and then autophagy. And the reason this is extraordinarily important is in terms of DNA, you have 10 to the 5th DNA errors per cell per day. 10 to the 5th. That is a lot. Most of it is single-stranded damage, right? If you picture your DNA molecule, it looks like a ladder that's twisted. And if you break the ladder in 2, that's a double-stranded injury, and it's associated with a lot of cancers and bad diseases. Single-strand is a little easier to fix, but it's still very metabolically expensive. But you have 5 ways of fixing your DNA. But again, it's all very metabolically expensive. And as you get older, you do not repair that DNA. People always wonder, why do I get cancer when I get older? Well, it's obvious. All the mechanisms to fix it take a dive, and all of the things that cause it go up, right? So you're basically...
And if you're getting cancer young, there's something breaking your DNA.
So super young pediatric cancers are different than adult cancers in terms of etiology, right? But if you have a family history and everyone in the family gets the same cancer, that's clearly genetically driven in terms of that organ system. If your family everyone has cancer, but they're different cancers, it is more likely a DNA repair problem, right? You just can't fix whatever breaks, right? So the good news is, again, all of these things are reversible to a certain degree, right? And then proteostasis is important. And this is always sort of an interesting topic because proteostasis has to do with keeping 3-dimensional proteins folded, right? Proteins work by being exactly folded exactly the way they're supposed to be. They look like globs if you just see them, but they're very particular in their 3-dimensional structure. And anything that changes that means the protein doesn't work. They say that it gets unfolded. So proteins that are important come with chaperones. So every protein has a babysitter, essentially. When the protein is born, it's granted its babysitter, goes with it through its life. If the protein gets out of line, the chaperone says, oh, no, stay in shape, right? And when the protein is ready to die or it just can't get put back into shape, the chaperone takes it to sort of like the place where it gets recycled, right? So the key here is, what are the chaperones? And a lot of these are heat shock activated proteins. This is why people like to be in the sauna. I don't know if they know this, but this is what the sauna does.
I crave heat and being in a sauna.
Yeah.
I love it.
There you go. That is a natural drive to fix your own proteins.
I mean, I've contemplated getting an infrared sauna cabin.
But keep in mind, there's a difference between the red infrared light. That's different on your mitochondria. That changes the spin of the ATPase molecule.
Oh, God, this is another conversation.
That's a whole other conversation. Versus just being able to raise your body temperature X number of degrees for X number of minutes.
Is that why exercise is also good? Because you're heating your body up.
Keep changing the subject. No.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Not really. But that's why saunas are useful.
Saunas, okay.
That's right.
Just sitting in a regular Finnish sauna.
And I had this conversation with Ben Greenfield. He's a huge advocate of saunas and such. And my response is always, that's really well and good, but there's drugs that do that too. Because I'm a huge proponent of pharmacy over actually having to do something.
So if you can't afford a sauna at home,
or
you don't have one in your gym down the road.
Yes, you can just buy drugs, which sounds terrible. But there's a wonderful medication sold in Japan. It's called Celbex, and it's actually sold for drug-induced gastritis or stomach upset, but it is a very potent heat shock protein activator. So by taking this pill, you're actually decreasing the incidence of neurologic disease because most of those are proteinopathies due to unfolding of proteins.
Interesting. And I guess that then goes the same for many conditions. There's a pharmaceutical or a nutraceutical that can help.
Absolutely. Okay. Which is why I take so many of them.
How many do you take?
I take 60 plus or minus supplements a day and 12 pharmaceuticals.
Goodness me.
I know.
How does that actually feel to swallow? Doesn't it get stuck in your throat?
No, it's not bad at all. If you can swallow food, you can swallow capsules. It may take you a few minutes. My general rule is I swallow 2 at a time, unless they're monstrous. The little teeny baby ones, you can fit in a few more. But I always do it before meals. Right? There's the morning pile, there's the pharmaceutical pile, and then there's the afternoon pile. I always do it before I eat. Otherwise, it's sort of a little bit nauseating if you're already full. But it's like a little appetizer. I pull out my little candy dish of pills, and everyone's always very entertained by it. And I can only do it with carbonated fluid, so I always drink a Diet Coke, which is really terrible for me, but I do it anyway.
You drink Diet Coke?
Yeah, I know, it's terrible.
I know you're also partial to a donut from time to time.
I love donuts. It's sad. However, there are 7 ways to block carbohydrates from causing harm in your body, and I do them all. So every bad habit I have, we can sort of out-metabolize. We can overthink it.
I am fascinated by that approach, and I think it's kind of useful because to tell someone they can never eat a donut again is not very appealing.
Oh, it sounds terrible. Where would life be without donuts?
Well, I haven't had one for a long time.
Well, then we'll just have to change that.
I'm too scared to eat a donut.
Oh, we can change that.
I know I look like I eat a lot of donuts, but I really don't. But,
no.
I'm on a quest to figure out my metabolism and how to help it work better.
Oh, well, we can do that.
Yes.
Piece of cake.
Sorry, I keep diversing. Let's get back to your tenets.
That's totally fine. So that's quality control. So then tenet 5 would be your immune system that becomes your inflammasome over time. So when you are young, your immune system is very healthy, very active. It gets rid of pathogens, very, very useful. When you are older, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So you're more likely to get diseases, pathogens, viruses, bacteria, etc. And these cells, when they become inflamed, don't turn off the way they should. So you end up becoming systemically inflamed. In fact, it's called your inflammasome or inflammaging. And inflammation causes proteins to deform. It causes DNA damage. It leads to cancer. And it's just an absolutely huge problem. So a lot of not aging has to do with turning off your inflammasome.
Great. Well, we're going to work on that together, I hope, because
absolutely.
I know that I'm highly inflamed. All my inflammation markers are always elevated.
Yeah. So we can fix
and that's irrespective of whether I'm living super healthily or not. I just remain inflamed all the time.
Yeah. That's just the way some people are. And if we know it, we can treat it.
Great.
Piece of cake. That's 5. 6 is individual cell requirements. And the rest of the tenets, I pretend like all cells are the same. And in this category, you say, you know what? Maybe they're not. So this is understanding that a nerve cell needs something different than a liver cell or a red cell, right? Some are mobile, some have different nutrient requirements, some are more acidic, and so on and so forth. So this is catering to individual cells. In addition, it's the recognition that stem cells, which we need to really take good care of, right, because we're going to run out over time, we need to baby them and give them exactly what they need, versus senescent cells, which some people call zombie cells. I call them grumpy old man cells. These are cells that we need to eradicate slowly but firmly, right? Because these are cells that were at one point normal cells. They underwent some sort of DNA damage. The body put them in shutdown, which is called quiescence, tries to fix the DNA, and if it can't, then it becomes senescent. It could also become cancerous or apoptotic and just disappear. But a lot of them become senescent.
And they just hang around?
They do. They just hang around, and if you think about a grumpy old guy, this is where the analogy comes in. They're just sort of fat and globular, and that's what the organelles look like. They're not pretty little cells anymore. They're sort of like... Blah, blah, blah.
Do they hide in fat?
Oh, there's lots of them in fat.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. And they exude complaints, right? Here's our fat guy just sitting in the corner at work, eating donuts and just like, just whining about things. And unfortunately, our cells do the same thing, right? They're fat, they're globular. They release something called the SASP, which is the secretory phenotype of just a ton of negative cytokinins and inflammatory cytokinins. And there's something called the paracrine effect, where if one cell is sort of old and grumpy, the rest of them become old and grumpy. It's the one bad apple in the bucket idea, right? Then they all sort of go bad. So the older you get and the more trauma you have, the more likely you are to have a huge senescent cell burden, which then causes more problems down the road. So when I see new patients, we talk about, do you have old injuries? Have you had radiation therapies? All of those things, because you get a huge accumulation of these senescent cells that most physicians ignore. So the idea is, well, let's eradicate them, and then we just do absolutely better. Of course, the running joke is if you have a patient that's super old, like their entire body is made up of senescent cells. So I have a running joke with this guy, Bill Andrews, who's like the king of telomeres. He's like, well, don't give old people anti-senescence because they're just going to go poof, and there will be nothing left of them, right? So you have to know sort of who you're treating, why you're treating them, and then do it in a very sort of organized fashion.
You mentioned the word cytokine, and I remember hearing that word a lot during COVID. So is this senescent cell cytokine storm thing that COVID induces, is it related, and is that why people had such poor outcomes in the old, in a much older age group? Oh,
without a doubt. So cytokinins, chemokines, all of these things are just incredibly inflammatory. So if you think about a standard inflammatory response, if you get like a bee sting or something, like if you think about that response and you put it through your entire body, that's what was happening to people with COVID. So if you already had pathologies, if you already had asthma, COPD, cardiac issues,
diabetes,
all of those things that make you unable to deal with a little bit of systemic inflammation, now you multiply it by whatever, a gazillion, your body can't tolerate it, right? Your lungs fill up with fluid, you just turn red, your blood vessels are leaky. People just couldn't tolerate it, and they passed away.
But if you've been supporting senescent cell elimination over the decade prior, let's say, to your 80th birthday.
Oh, you would do much better.
You do much better.
Absolutely, you do much better.
Okay. And what's your final? Are we on the final tenet?
So the final tenet is what I call waste management. And this is anything like your cell sort of has to have, but you don't really want it. Oxygen could theoretically be here, but I always put it in mitochondria just because it's sort of like easier housekeeping. So this is mostly glycation issues and then something called lipofuscin accumulation. So this is actually, as a diabetic, you will find this very interesting. So waste management is glucose. And glucose always gets a bad name. It's actually not as bad as fructose or sucrose or any of the other ones. But if you take a reducing sugar, put it in an oxidizing condition, it becomes something called an AGE, which is an advanced glycation end product. And these sort of break, the glucose molecule breaks, and it sticks to proteins, as I mentioned. And there's 20-some different AGEs, and they're incredibly inflammatory, and they're very sticky.
That's probably what's happening in my body.
Absolutely what's happening to you. So what happens? They stick to very specific proteins, and very specifically 3 amino acids within those proteins. So they love collagen. So you get AGE accumulation on collagen, and it causes it to snap, right? This is why skin droops over time, right? You do look at collagen, normally it sort of moves around. And my example is always like a cloth napkin, right? You can sort of slide it because there's fibers going in different directions. As soon as you put a drop of glue on there and they let it dry and you pull it, they break. That's what an AGE does to your collagen. It does it in your skin. It does it in your bones. It's why one of the reasons that people have very frail bones over time, right? They just get glycosylated. In addition, they're very inflammatory. So the inflammasome that we just talked about is worse when you have AGEs sort of floating around.
Can you measure them, AGEs?
So you can measure them in your skin. There's this cute little machine that comes from Amsterdam. You put it on your skin, it goes, and it'll tell you sort of like, how much glycation damage you have in your skin. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd be curious to do that.
Yeah.
I'd be off the scale. I'm usually in the red zone of most tests, unfortunately.
It can be scary. But the good news is I have, as part of the protocols, right now we've been through all the horrible things that can happen to you. There are ways to reverse most of, or if not all of this. It's for glycation specifically. You can block glucose absorption. You can block glucose metabolism. You can block AGE production. You can sop up AGEs once they're sort of floating around in your body. There are just ways to take care of all of these things, which is...
I mean, shouldn't all diabetics be asking these questions and exploring these kind of options?
Yes. Yeah.
But we're just not given that option.
Because standard physicians don't know any of this.
Wow, it's quite mind-blowing. And I'm really curious to start a protocol and measure what happens over time, and be my own little proof that it works.
I will tell you that you're not a guinea pig. I have done this for thousands and thousands of people. I don't even know who they are. I get emails from around the globe daily. I make suggestions, or I talk to people sort of in personal consults, and people just do significantly better.
Yeah, amazing. Tell me about your books. We've got your books here. So which one came first?
Okay, so the one without me on the cover came first, and I was...
What's in this?
So I was trying to figure out exactly what to put in this. So the way it is set up, and the title is, I'm just not good at titles. It says Why We Age and How to Stop It. And the first half is exactly what I just told you. It is why we age. And there's a chapter on each of the 7 tenets.
Oh, look, there's a picture of a DNA strand that's breaking up.
Yeah, see, there you go. It is all very, very explanatory.
So even someone that hasn't studied biochemistry will be able to get something from this.
Absolutely. And there's also a lot of really bad jokes in there.
Oh, my God.
Which sort of, it's just sort of make people to help sort of get through the hard stuff. And then the second half was the top 14, 15 agents at the time when I wrote it, and then exactly what they do in each of the 7 tenets and how well they do it.
The enigma of resveratrol.
There you go. So just sort of some fun analogies, some explanations, and then there's
astaxanthin.
I love astaxanthin.
Tell me why you love astaxanthin, because I remember we were having a meeting and someone asked you if there's one supplement you would recommend that anyone and everyone take. It's astaxanthin. And why? Do you call it a supplement? Yes, because we don't...
No, it's an adjuvant.
It's an adjuvant.
It's an adjuvant.
I need to get my vocabulary correct.
So astaxanthin comes from algae, and it's the green algae goop that you see in a bird bath, right? And if you physiologically stress that, it exudes this pinkish orangish goo. And for the algae, that goo is designed to protect its DNA because it's an extremely powerful free radical scavenger. And what it does for us is if we eat it, it protects our DNA. There are very, very, very few contraindications to it. Gout is probably one of the few. But you can take it.
So if you're suffering with gout, it might not be a good idea to take that.
Because it gets metabolized through the xanthine oxidase and blah blah blah. So that's probably the only true issue. But everyone eats it every day for the most part. Anything that's pink or orange in the marine environment is that color because of astaxanthin. So I always tell people, if you're going to go to the store and buy salmon, you want the pinkest salmon there is because it's loaded down with astaxanthin. So we want that.
So what's it good for? What does it do to us?
So when we ingest it, number one, it gets deposited in your tissues and it sits in the mitochondrial membrane for about 24 hours, sucks up free radicals. So it is anti-inflammatory and it protects your DNA. And I know that it works because I am very pale and I live in Miami. My children are very pale and we live in Miami. And we don't burn. We do not get sunburn because of astaxanthin.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So it's an internal sunblock.
Amazing. I see nicotinamide, adenine dinucleotide.
Yes.
Which we've been speaking about quite a lot over the last 24 hours.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about that?
So NAD, so years ago when I started doing this, people said, well, what are the top 5 things if you had to give anyone? And I decided that if I had to choose 5, and it was a tough choice, right? There are a lot of contenders. I went with pterostyl, astaxanthin, nicotinamide, carnosine, and curcumin. So clearly NAD is very important in this protocol. And what it does is, number one, you need it for energy. It's part of your mitochondrial build, right? It's in the, as I said before, electron transport chain, the Krebs cycle, et cetera. Incredibly important for energy production. It is also incredibly important because it is a cofactor for something called PARPs. PARPs are what repair your DNA. So if you are NAD deficient, you're not going to repair your DNA. Therefore, you are set up for morbidity and mortality in the form of just, mostly cancer. So that's a big problem. And 2, it's a cofactor for your sirtuins. And sirtuins, as we said, control all cellular homeostasis. So if you are sirtuin deficient and NAD deficient, you're going to be in serious trouble. And then lastly, NAD is an extremely important communicator. Sort of flows around your body in cells and out of cells, and it communicates the idea of energy supplies, essentially. So when you hit the age of 40, you are statistically likely to be NAD deficient. So all of these things are going to suffer.
And then if you've got a chronic condition, even more so.
Right. If you have a chronic condition, your cells are on overload trying to make up for that chronic condition or those insults. Therefore, you're going to use it up faster and be deficient more quickly.
And a conversation I have with a lot of people is NAD molecule can't get into the cell, but we now understand that it can to certain cells, but not all cells, and it is utilized extracellularly in all cells? We don't know.
So the answer is extracellularly, yes, it floats around in your vasculature and sort of outside of your cells, right? It can only get into your neurons by itself. It can't get broken into other pieces and parts. It goes to NAM, turns into NMN, NNR, and those in fact can get into cells. However, different tissues around your body prefer different varieties of this. And there's a big raging war, as you know. Do you take nicotinamide riboside? Do you take nicotinamide mononucleotide? Do you go straight up NAD? And I honestly believe, because different tissues have different preferences, that the answer is going to be a little bit of all of them, as well as then sort of maybe decreasing utilization, because clearly we don't want to turn off sirtuins or PARPs, but there's something called CD38 that sits on inflammatory cells in your immune system, gets turned on by inflammation, and then sort of increases the inflammatory response. So by blocking CD38, we can actually save some of our NAD stores. And we can do that with something called apigenin, which is a very easily, you can get it over the counter, Amazon or just wherever. So there's many ways to sort of play with your NAD levels. Okay. But I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. I think it's going to be sort of a polypharmacy system.
Why do you think I would have felt an uplift from injecting pure NAD? So
I think, and I don't have any evidence for it, but my best guess is that you are very deficient in NAD. Therefore, you're going to immediately feel it going through your bloodstream.
Yeah. I actually took some like an hour ago, and
And you're buzzing?
I'm not buzzing, but I'm definitely feeling more focused than I would do had I not taken it.
Okay. No, that's absolutely reasonable.
Quite often in the afternoon, this time in the afternoon, I might be feeling a little on the tired side, but I'm not feeling that.
then it's clearly
doing something.
It's clearly doing something. But no, I think that if you are somewhat deficient or if you are on the edge, you're going to feel the extra boost.
Sure. And it's getting into my neurons.
No, it absolutely is. It's also, extracellularly, it's a neurotransmitter as well. So you're going to be feeling that.
Yeah.
Like I inject as well, but I don't feel it. But I think that I am not deficient because I've been using all of these supplements for a decade now.
Yeah, sure. So then we've got curcumin, which I'm fascinated by, and carnosine, which you've introduced to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be reading your book and learning all about it.
Fantastic.
And the second book, tell me about that.
Okay, so book 2 came about because the information available, it's just coming out sort of exponentially quickly. It's amazing. So the idea was to take the next 28 agents, and I picked them out individually to sort of represent new ideas and new concepts. So I want people to understand that they don't need to take all of these agents, but that this gives them information to be able to say, you know what, this one works for me, this one doesn't. The other thing I introduced in book 2 is it's done by not only rating, but by organ system. So let's say you have heart issues, skin issues, there's a chart in the back. If you look up the skin icon, it'll sort of tell you exactly what to take, or the lungs, or the this, or the that. So there's now many ways that people can sort of figure out what they need to take for themselves to make it more personal.
So if people can't access an appointment with you, then getting this, well, both of your books would be very useful.
Oh,
it's a really
100%.
good place to start if you want to sort of doctor yourself and figure it out for yourself.
100%. This explains it, I think, reasonably well. Even simpler is on the website. So there's lots of places that this information is available.
And you're in the process of writing your third book.
I am, yes.
Is that because there's a whole new load of molecules that have emerged?
Well, that and we're learning a lot about some of the old ones as well. So I think we need to do a revamp of all of the things that's sort of going on in cells. I mean, the information just comes out so quickly. All of these just new, interesting ideas and concepts. So yeah, I think a general rewrite of why we age, and then, lots of new agents and lots of new formulations.
And are they a mix of pharmaceuticals and sort of more natural supplements?
Good question. So the only pharmaceutical in the books is metformin. I do use a lot of pharmaceuticals in my private patients. I don't put them in books. I'm very fearful that someone's going to try to, take care of that and sort of do something that's not exactly what they should be doing. Okay. So that should be limited to physicians and private consults.
Okay, I was going to ask you about metformin, but I think we'll save that for another day. I'm quite interested in it because it's been prescribed to me over the years and I've cycled in and out of taking it. But all the research I have read on it is positive.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
Okay,
oh, yeah.
Well, we'll save that for another time. So thank you for coming in and talking to me today. And I look forward to working with you and seeing how your work can reach a wider audience, because I think it's really important work.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.